Alright, here it goes. Around 20 plus years ago, me and 4 of my buddies in our teenage years, 13 through 15, were really into exploring abandoned buildings and other such places. We had more than a couple places explored under our belts. We even visited once an abandoned psychiatric hospital that was supposedly haunted, but nothing happened except for me stubbing a toe. During our exploration, nothing major ever happened, except for one building in which my buddy miraculously avoided falling from second floor, since the floor in one of the buildings collapsed under him. Couple weeks after one of our missions, one buddy tells us that he knows of a location of an abandoned military bunker that we can explore. As the angsty teenagers that we were back then, we, without wasting time, prepared ourselves and headed out to the place the next day. Place was located in a literal bumfuck nowhere. We had to go first using 2 buses to their last stop, had to get a ride, and we still had to go through a lush forest and the road on foot. Still took like an hour or so to get there. After our small journey, we found a fence that was clearly ripped in almost half in one of the places. One of our buddies pointed out the signs on the fence. You know the type of signs that Area 51 has that basically says, military area, we shoot first and ask questions? Yeah, those type of signs were placed all over. Area around fence, even in the bunker area, was covered in a thick foliage, ferns, bush, trees, the usual suspects, and you couldn't see shit past the foliage. Hell, you probably wouldn't be able to find the place without knowing its location because the foliage was that thick. Anyways, after a short walk, we got into the main bunker area. There were 5 bunkers and 1 hangar type of building there. Each bunker was camouflaged with thick layers of moss and grass, and the hangar had your usual bread and butter khaki type of camouflage on the roof. You wouldn't be able to tell if the area had any type of buildings from a bird's point of view. We made one of the bunkers with a tree growing on the top of it as our base of operations. We gathered and hid our belongings there, taking only the most useful stuff: batteries, knives, some rope, flashlight, the usual suspects. Then we started exploring our first bunker. Nothing unusual. This bunker seemed to be used as a living quarter for grunts, since first floor was just a huge as fuck open space, with destroyed and corroded frames. After bunker beds and other stuff like that, we wanted to descend to second level, but it was flooded. Despite being teenagers that don't afraid of anything, we used our combined intellect to proceed further into the bunker. We explored the same way, bunker 2, 3, and 4. We didn't find anything particularly impressive or of value. Maybe some rubble, broken furniture, flooded lower levels, and piece of concrete that gave up due to natural causes. 5th bunker from the get-go felt odd. I can't tell what it was. Maybe the parked in the front of the bunker jeep that was in also almost pristine condition, or maybe the fact that we had to go full commando and hide in foliage, since we encountered 1 military patrol still in the one place we all felt odd. This particular bunker was different from the rest. In comparison to the other 4, it was huge. I mean, fuck huge. It had 2 huge places where there were probably some garage doors, probably for tanks and other vehicles. The whole thing was so big, you could easily cram in there 8 tanks or so, and there was still place. Bunker had 2 regular personnel entrances. One was sealed shut with thick doors and we couldn't get it to open. However, second was wide open. After going through the doors, we did a small check on our equipment, since if your batteries die, it wouldn't be pleasant, especially 2 to 3 stories underground with no natural light source. This is where the odd feeling intensified. We got into a small discussion about that, but after a short argument and calling each other pussies like the kids we were, we proceeded anyways. Second odd thing happened, since almost simultaneously all our flashlights decided to commit seppuku in almost the exact same moment we went past the initial room. That was some sort of hatch. We shrugged it off, replaced batteries, and went again. But our fresh batteries died. Literally 1 minute into exploring. We maybe seen like 1 to 2 room tops, and we go back since it's dark as shit. However, my flashlight wasn't shit, and didn't rely on batteries only. It had a hidden power cord compartment to store spare batteries, as well as a button for long and short signals, and even an ACME style type of deal level that you can crank to charge it manually in dire situations. We decided to go in conga-like style, holding each other's arms from their behind, while the first person held the flashlight and guided us into the bunker. First floor was nothing unusual from the inside. 1 room was flooded and covered in some weird looking moss, and was mostly empty. 1 was some sort of office, and the remaining 2 rooms appeared to be a small storage unit and toilets. Immediately upon descending, it became fucking freezing down there. Nothing weird since we were like 15 to 20 meters underground, but it was a bit strange since it was in the middle of summer, and temps easily reached 30 degrees Celsius in shadows. Second floor was mostly empty. 1 corridor leading from 1 stairs to another with rooms that were mostly empty. Only thing of value we found was a piece of old newspaper that was like 10 years old, but in its current condition, we weren't able to read almost anything else on it. Plus, it literally crumbled upon being touched. One of us started to feel this feeling that could be associated with regular fear, but as teenagers and calling each other pussy again, we manned up and followed us further. We started descending to the 3rd floor. The area seemed to be the same as upper floor. One corridor, stair behind us, and at the end of the corridor are like 10 doors that lead to different rooms, from which 2 of the doors were leading to the same space that probably was used as a living area in the past. We could tell by the remains of basic furniture. Nothing of value and particular interest was here, so we slowly started creeping towards the stairs leading to the 4th floor. In this moment, hairs on my body stood up out of nowhere, and this weird feeling became even more apparent. We didn't even call each other pussy. We were a bit freaked out at this point, but anyways, we decided to descend. On floor 4, it seemed to be an exact same copy of the previous floor, with one big difference. In the place where a flight of stairs should be leading deeper was the T section, which led to different parts of the bunker, but it was completely flooded and we couldn't proceed further. We took maybe a couple steps into the floor when our leading buddy stopped and started cranking the flashlight, since it obviously started to run out of juice, and it was flashing like trying to send an SOS signal. While the first person in the column was cranking the flashlight, we started to talk about some shit like teenagers, and one of us checked what hour it was. Since we took our sweet ass time exploring, it would be nice to know when we needed to stop in order to get a bus back home. Suddenly, my hair stood up once more, and what I felt back then could be described as a fight or flight type of response. Out of the blue, I was scared like hell, while 2 of my buddies in the column started shaking uncontrollably, like they're scared shitless themselves. Also, I didn't ask, but noticed one small detail. Despite this being an abandoned bunker, there were still sounds there. We were still accompanied by the usual sounds of water droplets hitting some surface, but suddenly it became dead silent. You could even barely hear us breathing. Buddy in front started shaking buddies. "The fuck is wrong with you pussies?" One of them simply pointed forward. We had little to no light, like 30 meters or more below the ground, since he was still trying to charge the flashlight. At the spot he was pointing at, one blue-like orb was obviously emitting light appeared. In my country, there are no glowworms since winters can be very harsh and they simply die out. But in front of us, maybe like 40 meters away, was this floating source of light that simply was floating. We stood scared shitless, watching it. Then 2 more orbs came from the T section, floating at approximately the same height as the first one. But he called us pussies because we're scared of some bugs. One of us retorted, "Dude, glowworms don't live in our country. Especially not in fucking bunkers of all things." Then the slow realization came to us. Those orbs were perfectly floating still in place, and started slowly creeping towards us in a straight line. At that moment of clarity, we ran, almost tripping over each other on the way out. Once we ran away, all those odd and weird feelings stopped. We took a small break and the flashlights with the crank suddenly started working properly again. We didn't give a fuck. We went to our base of operations, packed our stuff, and simply bolted from the place. Another weird thing happened on our way out. While we exited the bunker, the weather was 100% clear, not a single cloud in sight whatsoever. However, 30 minutes on the way back, I noticed something weird and pointed it out to our buddies. On top of the area in which the bunkers were located, suddenly a huge cloud appeared seemingly out of nowhere. "It's just a cloud, you pansy." But the cloud suddenly made this O shape in the center of itself, and this like ray of light was descending from it on the area we just ran away from. We didn't talk about the stuff we just saw on the way out. We never believed in anything paranormal or anything of that sort. But the stuff we've seen and felt, our feeble teenage minds couldn't explain in any way, shape, or form. The more I think about this story, the more questions pop up in my head. 1. How in the fuck my teenage buddy knew the location of this place in literal nowhere, and how to get to it? Like I previously said, this place was properly masked, even if abandoned, so he needed to know the exact location of it to find it. And phones, especially the high-tech ones at the time, didn't have GPS functions, and internet access on them was something unheard of. This place was abandoned, but it was still fenced off, and if unlucky, you could meet a patrol of fully armed soldiers there. The place a couple years later, when I went back, was fucking gone. No bunkers, no hangar, even the concrete roads were stripped. The place was just a patch of foliage in the middle of nowhere. None of us believed in anything paranormal before that, and you'd be marked as weird for even suggesting such things. But this experience opened my eyes a little bit.